Form is emptiness. You have read that line. You have nodded at it. And you have no idea what it means. That is not your fault. Someone changed it. 1,500 years ago, one word in that sentence was swapped, and that single change turned a practical instruction into a philosophical riddle that no one, not monks, not scholars, not you, can solve. The original word is still sitting in older manuscripts, and when you put it back, the most confusing line in Buddhism becomes something so simple, you will wonder how it was ever a mystery. The person who may have seen this most clearly was a 90-year-old Vietnamese monk, and he tried to fix it 3 years before he died. To understand how one word rewrote Buddhism's most famous text, you have to meet the man who carried it across a desert. In the early 7th century, a young Chinese monk named Xuanzang was living near the city of Chengdu when he found a man no one else would touch. The man was covered in open sores. His clothes were rags. He smelled so foul that other monks turned away. Xuanzang brought him inside, fed him, washed him, gave him clean robes and a place to sleep. The man had nothing to give in return, except a text. 260 characters. A condensed teaching on the perfection of wisdom. The Prajnaparamita Hridaya, the Heart Sutra. Prajnaparamita. Prajna, P-A-H-Ramita, does not mean what you think. It is not the perfection of knowledge. Paramita means gone to the other shore. This is wisdom that carries you across, like a raft, not like a library. Xuanzang memorized those 260 characters and began reciting them. If you had watched him in that moment, a young monk murmuring words given to him by a man everyone else had abandoned, you would not have guessed what those words would do for him next. In 629, he defied an imperial travel ban and walked west, alone, illegally, by night. When he reached the Gobi Desert, his guide abandoned him. He lost his water. He hallucinated for 4 days. And according to his biography, he saw demons, strange shapes pressing in from every direction. He called on the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara by name. They did not scatter. Then he recited those 260 characters, and at the sound of the words, every shape disappeared. He walked for 16 years. He reached India. He studied at Nalanda, the greatest Buddhist university in history. He came back with 657 Sanskrit manuscripts, and he spent the rest of his life translating them. The Heart Sutra, those 260 characters from a nameless sick man, became the most chanted text in Mahayana Buddhism. But here is the part Xuanzang could not have known. The text he was chanting, the one that scattered demons in the desert, had already been changed before he was born. And the change was not an accident. The Heart Sutra's core passage was not composed from scratch. In 1992, a scholar named Jan Nattier published a paper that upended 15 centuries of assumption. She demonstrated that the Heart Sutra's central section was extracted, copied, from a much older, much longer text, the Large Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, translated into Chinese by a monk named Kumarajiva around the year 400. Someone in China took Kumarajiva's translation, pulled out the most potent passage, wrapped a frame story around it, and created the Heart Sutra. Then, and this is the part that stunned the scholarly world, the text was translated backward into Sanskrit to make it look Indian. The most Indian text in Buddhism may be Chinese, and if that surprises you, what comes next will do more than surprise you. But Nattier's discovery was about origin. The deeper problem is about a single word, and that change happened even earlier. The oldest perfection of wisdom text we have is called the Ashtasahasrika, the 8,000-line version. In that text, a disciple named Subhuti says something about form. He says it in Sanskrit, and the formula is clear. Illusion is not different from form. Form is just illusion. Illusion is just form. The word he uses is maya, ya, not emptiness, illusion. And maya does not mean fake. It does not mean unreal. It is the word for a magic show. The rabbit is real. The disappearance is constructed. You are not being told that nothing exists. You are being told that things appear one way and function another. Then a later text was composed, the Pankavamsata Sahasrika, the 25,000-line version, and the author of that text took Subhuti's formula and made one deliberate change. He removed Maya and replaced it with sunyata, emptiness. Form is just emptiness. Emptiness is just form. That is the line you know. That is the line that ended up in the Heart Sutra, and that is the line that makes people feel like they are in free fall, because emptiness, in English, sounds like void, like nothing. Like the ground has been pulled out from under you. The ground was never pulled. The word was swapped. So the word was changed. The text was cut and reassembled, and for 15 centuries, no major Buddhist teacher questioned it publicly, until one did. If you are still here, you already know more about the Heart Sutra's history than most people who chant it daily. What comes next is the part that changes how you read it, and possibly how you see everything the Buddha taught about the nature of your own experience. If this is the kind of content that makes you think differently, subscribe. And if you have ever struggled with the word emptiness, tell me in the comments what you thought it meant before today. In 2014, a 90-year-old Vietnamese Zen master named Thich Nhat Hanh did something that shocked the Buddhist world. He rewrote the Heart Sutra. He had been teaching it for 60 years. He had chanted it thousands of times, and he had watched, decade after decade, as Western students sat with the line, "In emptiness, there is no form, no feelings, no perceptions, no mental formations, no consciousness," and walked away believing that Buddhism teaches nothing is real. That is exactly what the line sounds like. In emptiness, there is no form, no feelings, no you. It sounds like annihilation. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, that is not what the Buddha meant. That was never what the Buddha meant. The problem is the words. He changed the line. His new version reads, "In emptiness, body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness are not separate self-entities. Not there is no form. Form is there. You are there. What is absent is the idea that any of it stands alone, separate, fixed, independent. Emptiness does not mean nothing exists. It means nothing exists by itself. Some Buddhists called it heresy, rewriting a sacred text that had stood for over a millennium. But Thich Nhat Hanh was not adding to the sutra. He was trying to undo what someone else had added 15 centuries earlier. He was pushing the text back toward what Maya had always meant. Not that the rabbit is not real, but that the trick is constructed. He died in 2022. He never saw the textual evidence that proved him right. That evidence came from two directions no one expected. The first was a neuroscience lab at Yale. In 2011, Judson Brewer and his team published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They put experienced meditators inside an fMRI scanner and watched what happened to their brains. What they found was this: a network called the default mode network. The part of your brain that generates your ongoing self-story, the constant narrator that says, "I am this, I want that, I was hurt by this, I need to become that," went quiet. Not dead, quiet. The meditators did not report void. They did not report nothingness. They reported something closer to transparency. They could see the process of selfing happening without being captured by it. The self did not vanish. It became see-through. That is Maya, not emptiness, not void, transparency. The magic show where you can finally see the strings. And if you have ever meditated, even once, you have touched the edge of this. The second line of evidence came from a scholar named Jayarava Attwood. In 2017, he published a paper tracing the exact moment the word was swapped. He went back to the Ashtha Sahasrika, the oldest perfection of wisdom text, and showed that the four-phrase formula everyone knows was originally built around Maya, not sunyata. He tracked it forward through the Pankavimsatisahasrika, where the substitution was made. And he showed why the change mattered. The Sanskrit root of sunyata, sunya, did not originally mean empty the way English speakers hear it. It meant swollen, hollow, like a seed pod that looks full from the outside but has nothing solid at its center. And when the Chinese translators encountered this word, they chose the character Kong, which means sky, open space, boundlessness. They did not choose Wu, which means nothing. The Chinese translators understood. It was the English translation that broke it. Emptiness was never the right word. The original was illusion. The Sanskrit root meant hollow. The Chinese said sky, and what meditators actually experience is transparency. 4 languages, 4 attempts, and the one that stuck in English is the one that sounds like a void. And now we can go back, all the way back, before the swap, before Kumarajiva, before the Heart Sutra existed, to a riverbank and a lump of foam. There is a sutta called the Phenapindupama, the lump of foam discourse. It is one of the oldest teachings we have, and it contains no riddles. The Buddha is sitting beside the Ganges with a group of monks. He reaches down to the river's edge and picks up a lump of foam. He holds it up. He squeezes. It disintegrates between his fingers. Monks, he says, form is like this. Whatever form there is, past, future, or present, it is like a lump of foam. Look at it carefully. Press into it. There is nothing solid there. Then he points to the surface of the water. A raindrop falls. A bubble appears and pops. Feeling is like this. It arises. It seems real. It vanishes. You have felt this. You know exactly what he means. He gestures to the far bank where the heat of the day bends the air into shapes that look like water but are not. You have seen this too. Perception is like a mirage. It shows you something that is not there in the way you think it is there. Then he picks up a piece of plantain trunk, a kind of banana tree, and peels it. Layer after layer, bark, fiber, pith, no core, no center, nothing inside that holds it all together. Mental formations are like this. Peel them back. There is no solid self holding them in place. And finally, consciousness. He compares it to a magic show, an illusion that appears vivid, feels real, captures your attention completely, and is constructed. There it is, the word he used, Maya, not sunyata, not emptiness, illusion, constructed appearance, the magic show. This is what the Heart Sutra was trying to preserve, not a philosophical claim that nothing exists, not a metaphysical riddle about form and void, a man sitting by a river showing you what your experience is actually made of, foam, bubbles, mirages, hollow trunks, and magic shows, all of it real, none of it solid, none of it permanent, and none of it yours to keep. The default mode network goes quiet, and you see this, not because reality has changed, because you stopped grabbing the hat and finally watched the trick. A meditator once described the moment it happened. He was driving through a desert at night when the reference point of me simply dropped away. There was no separation between his hand, the wheel, the road, the sky, and he could still drive. Everything was still there. He just was no longer standing in the middle of it, narrating. The Buddha never said the rabbit was not real. He said, stop grabbing the hat. When you read the Heart Sutra again, and you will, try replacing emptiness with illusion. Form is illusion. Illusion is form. Illusion is not other than form. Form is not other than illusion. It does not sound like a riddle anymore. It sounds like a man by a river holding foam, saying, look, just look at what this is. So here is what the Heart Sutra actually says when you give it back its original word. First, the line, form is emptiness, was not written by the Buddha. It was assembled from older texts, altered by a later author who swapped Maya for sunyata, translated into Chinese, condensed into 260 characters, and then translated backward into Sanskrit to look like it had always been there. The riddle is not deep. The riddle is a translation artifact. Second, when you encounter the word emptiness in any Buddhist text, try hearing it as transparency, not void, not nothing, transparency. The ability to see that what looks solid is actually moving, what looks permanent is actually changing, what looks like a thing is actually a process. You do not need to believe in anything to see this. You just need to look at the foam. Third, you are not someone who failed to understand the most important text in Buddhism. You are someone who was handed a word that does not work in English. And you felt it. That discomfort, that freefall, that sense that something was off. That was not confusion. That was prajnaparamita, the wisdom that knows when the raft has a hole in it. A modern Buddhist teacher once put it this way: all nouns are really just slow-moving verbs. You are not a self that is empty. You are a process that is happening, foam forming, bubbles rising, a magic show in progress. Nothing to grab, nothing to fear, and nothing that needs to be nothing. When you first read "form is emptiness," what did you think it meant? And now that you know the original word, does illusion change it for you? Tell me in the comments. 260 characters, one changed word. 1,500 years of people believing that Buddhism says nothing is real, when what it actually says is everything is real. Just not the way you think. Nagarjuna, the philosopher who understood sunyata better than anyone, said it in 6 words. Thanks to emptiness, everything is possible. He was right, but he would have been clearer if he had kept the older word. Thanks to illusion, thanks to the fact that nothing is fixed, everything is possible, including you.